Good day, everyone. S- So, what I'm going to do in this topic is give you a general introduction to convolutional neural networks. It will get a gentle overview and hopefully develop your intuition and understanding of CNNs because we're going to go into CNNs and quite a bit of detail over the next about an hour of lectures. So before we start, we need to ground you in your understanding for it. So let's take a look at these images. So let's take a look at this cat. So you know it's a cat, right? What about this? You know this one. So it's a dog. But what do we see in the images that told us that this was a cat and this is a dog? You as a human, you have learned the differences between cats and dogs from a very young age. You know what a cat looks like. It has these whiskers, these big eyes. You know what the shape of a cat is. And you know, dogs are quite distinct. So there are many things that tell us it was a cat or a dog. But how does a computer or an algorithm or some software do this? How does it know whether it's a cat or a dog? How do we predict this from an image? So that's what convolutional neural networks allow us to do. So these are types of neural networks that allow us to fed images in and get a class out of it. And that's the most basic sense of what it is. So let's build some intuition on how CNNs work. So this look like the number one. It's a written handwritten digit here. You know what digits are from 1 to 10. You know all the symbols in all the letters. You know many things. So, how did you know this is number one? So, how would you tell a computer to actually figure out what it is? So, was it the overall shape or what else? But there are many issues with that, no? Because what if most of these sides are as a number one, but it was a piece that was outside here, like example number 7 or out of different shape. You know that it can happen. So what else, no? What if it was shifted in this case? What if we shifted it out of this region? Then you know there's no longer the number one here based on our hard coded programming because it is updated and you need to update it or you need to update your programming or the hard coded code to learn that it is a number one. So how does a CNN or how does a neural network able to do this? Well, this is how basically neural networks or convolutional neural networks. So it have many filters, and these filters These filters allows us to extract features from different parts of the image. Here, I'll explain this to you and in the later sections, but for now, think about this. No? An image, no, an image of a cat, no? Or imagine a cat in your head. Imagine we have, imagine we had a filter, this one, that was that was looking um for a thin, narrow, or vertical shape. So imagine you have a specific filter, and by filter, I mean like merging a little sliding window here, so that when it goes over those pixels, it activates that exactly what happens in neural networks. So imagine we have hundreds or thousands of these filters. So each filter is looking for specific features in an image. And depending on which of those filters to turn on, then that depends on the class. So you can see, so it outputs probability at the end of the images. In this case, it's a cat. So that should ground you in a basic understanding of what CNNs are. This is a very long topic, so we divide it into two parts, topic 2.1 to 2.11, then 2.12 to 2.20. We're going to do a lot of detail on CNNs, starting with what a convolutions is, what a feature detectors, um, 3D conv filters, so how these 3D convolution filters work when you do convolution on 3D images. So what's it like on color images for this case? So we're going to take a look at kernel size and depth, padding and stride, activation layers, which is the relu function, pooling, fully connected layers, softmax. Then we're going to take a look at putting all together to build the CNN. And then we're going to take a look at how we get our parameters. Parameters comes from a CNN. And then we'll discuss why CNNs work so well in images. And then we go into the process or the training process, which is the inner workings that make CNNs more or come alive. So this one is this one will be our laboratory exercises. Uh, and now we talk about loss functions, back propagation, and the gradient descent. And then we take a look at some advanced things, no? Like optimizers and the learning rate schedulers. And then we do a summary of CNNs in the end and a sort of deep learning history and deep learning libraries. So we're going to take a look at convolutions, the operation that allows us to detect features in images. So what exactly is a convolution operation? A convolution operation is a mathematical, for a while, let me use the pen, okay? So, a convolutional operation is a mathematical a term that describes the process of combining two functions to produce a third. Well, it's quite simple. It's like any other mathematical operation. So if you think about it, like example, A plus B is equal to C. So it describes the process of combining two functions to produce a third. However, in our situation with the output, we call it the feature map in this case. And we'll get to feature maps shortly. So we use a matrix called the filter and kernel, or we, ter- we call it kernel also, which is applied to our image. So the first function, remember, we talk about two functions here. The first function is our image. It is then combined or multiplied depending on how you want to describe the operation. Convolve is the actual correct term. Convolve with a kernel or a filter, and that produces our feature map. So this one, image convolved using a kernel, it will produce a feature map. So this is just a mathematical, well, this is just mathematically what I'm describing here. So it's quite a simple concept. So now let's take a look um, at a very basic view of the operation. Imagine this is our input image here. Imagine it's a binary image. So the ones represents white, the zeros represents black. So it's a pretty weird image right now, and doesn't really represents anything, as this is our filter or kernel. So hypothetically, we just multiplying our input image again. So a filter, which to produce this output feature map here. So how does this work? So from here, so just to refresh your memory. Remember I said a one has a white and the zero was black. Well, in reality, grayscale images are represented from 0 to 2 pi pi, with 2 pi pi being white. So, so you can see it's all white here. And if you look closely, you can see as the values get lower, it turns into different shades of gray. So with these values being pure black, which is probably going to be 0, even this we can't see we can see it because it's a black on a black font. But nevertheless, that's how images are shown in this example here. So this is an actual image, except the values are scaled differently. So hope I didn't lose you there. It's not complicated. It's quite simple so far. So this is an actual image, except the values are scaled differently. Hope I didn't lose you there. So it's, well, it's not complicated. Okay, and so let's continue with the convolution operation. And now let's take a look at the actual mathematics behind the convolution operation. Well, it's not complicated. It's quite simple. It's just multiplication and addition. And that, so I'll step through the first calculation here. So the first calculation, so what I mean is that I'll show you how we calculate the first top left here of our feature map. So as you can see, we overlaid this blue matrix onto here. So remember that it was 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1 in this case. However, you can see it's now multiplied by digits here. So you just directly map this across here to the top left, and as you can see, you can multiply this one. No? So here you have 1 times 0. Then what we have here is 0 times 1 and 1 times 0. And again. So then you will multiply each um, corresponding um, blocks here, in this case. Then after you multiply, you need to add each points here. Example, 1 times 0 plus 0 times 1. Then again, it will leads to or results to number 2. Then you will put this into the feature map here. So how do we get the next digit? So we will, as you uh, as you may have noticed, we simply shifted the matrix here. So the matrix shifted by one step here. And then we multiply it out just again, and we get the value 1 in this case. So we're multiplying all these values and solving them individually. So you get the value 1. And then so on. Then it gives us the value -1. So we move again one step. And then again, as we keep going again, you need to step down here again and again. And next step, and this one. And then we go down, and let's move to the right, and one step to the right, and one step to the right. And that's how we get our feature map output. So you can see when we multiply a 5 by 5 image matrix here, we get um so well no this is a 5 by 5 image, and we convolve it by a 3 by 3 kernel. So we get a 3 by 3 feature map. So what are image features? So as you can, as you know, well, as you may not know yet, but but I'll tell you now, feature maps actually feature detectors. So why did we just do this convolution? Because convolution filters or kernels actually acts as a feature detectors. So to detect special features in images. Take a look at this one. This convolution filter right here. So this one 100. And well, we have this one. This one is our convolutional filter here. So this one is our input image, and this one is our convolutional filter here. So this one is 1 1 1 0 0 0 -1 -1 -1. So when you multiply this kernel by this image, and well, this image basically an edge. As you can see, there's a one here, and this one has zero. So this one is it's like an edge here. So as you can see, we have this representation of this image here. So as you can convolve this one, so if you try to convolve this one, then it will result into this 3 by 3 feature map. And as you can see, it's like the same as what you somehow it is same as this one, no? So it detects it detects a feature here as an edge in this case. So you can see that it translates the edge directly. So this means that it worked as a edge detector here, this kernel here. And these are some examples of other feature or feature detectors that can be, well, hard coded here. However, just so you know, in CNNs, our kernels aren't hard coded. They're initially or initialized at randomly and see during the training process. So it learns the weights of, well, different filters. So that's the cool part, which we'll get into shortly. But that's the cool part about CNNs. So we will not um, create um, we will not hard coded those kernels. They're just randomly initialized in the during the training process. So we will get into shortly for this. So these are some examples of basically kernels that were that we extracted from a trained CNN. And you can see this one is looking for like sort of edge pattern here. This one looking for a stripe here. This one is for looking horizontal stripes here, and s- sample for this one. No? But someone looking for a somewhat checkerboard pattern here, and well, this one, no? This one is looking for a pink blob. So you can see feature detectors being able to detect many different features. So So imagine you're now using all of these different features or different feature combinations of this to detect what a dog is or a cat. You see how it you will see how it makes sense now. So you can see how powerful CNNs are. S- So this is an example of just sliding a window across just to get the output of um this feature detector. So so you can see how it looks and just do it again. So let's take a look at it. So and that's the feature map it produced from the output. So how do we calculate the feature map size? Remember, I said this was a 5 by 5 matrix here, which you can see uh, here with a 3 by 3 kernel, which you can see, and 3 by 3 output here. But how do you know this size is going to be a 3 by 3 output? But we can have images of many different sizes as as well as many different size kernels. So so here's a sample or a simple formula to get the output size. So it's in n as the dimension of the image here, then and f is for the kernel size, and then m is the size of the feature map or the map size. So now, as you can see, we have the image here. The image has dimensions of 5. Then we have a kernel size here 3. So 5 minus 3 plus 1 is equal to 3. So now we assume that it's a square images for CNN. So it makes the calculation and process much faster, and it doesn't affect anything. So even if you resize a different aspect ratio image, so it still remains, trains and learns quite well. So so just remember all images and CNNs are square or they are square images. And the F is the kernel or filtered dimensions. So we have a 3 by 3. Again, it's a square. And plus 1. So we got 5 minus 3 plus 1. It gives us 3. And that's the dimension of our feature map. Okay, for the next lesson is on feature detectors. And well, and we will take a look at how each of the detectors help us classify images. So let's go into the slides. So, okay, so take a look at this image here. This is a cat. As I discussed earlier, we know this is a cat, but how do we know? Because we see patterns and our brain probably combines known to us. So all of those little features we're seeing in the cat and automatically associates that is a cat. Just so you know, our brain is absolutely incredible at visual processing. I think roughly two-thirds of our brain is dedicated to vision. And being a computer vision myself, I can definitely see why vision is such a complicated task for a computer to do well. So back to this lesson. So imagine we have a convolutional filters, and as you saw previously, we slide these filters looking for specific features. So imagine we have a feature looking for a cat or for a cat eye or the whiskers or the ears. So that's going to be a convolutional filter that is looking specifically for that. So let's take a look, just drag across there, and then just to illustrate what the convolutional or convolution filters do. And it's going back and forth like that over and over with that image. So what to do? So what to do? The convolutional filters look for. So imagine we had trained a CNN that makes able to detect cats. So it actually creates filters that corresponds to the new features in the image. So it learns what a cat looks like bit by bit. So you can get features that looks like whiskers, one looks like eyes, one looks like the ears, I believe. So it's going to go through this image slide window here, no? Back and forth, looking for these features, and it's going to trigger the feature maps that are basically activated. When these features are seen, and those are basically going to be stored here, and it's a lot more to CNN, so don't worry. But for now, just think of it that the hidden layers will now take these features and imagine like this. It's like a decision tree here. No? So if this is, then it's a cat. If not, it's a dog or whatever class it's trained to recognize. So in the past, this is something that made CNN so amazing. So in the past, computer vision involved us using handcrafted features, which was basically painful because it involved so much trial and error and so many different feature extraction methods. Well, it worked when there wasn't much variation in images. I think you're already familiar with our laboratory activities, like sample Haar cascades, and well, somehow it detects, it misclassifies whatever objects in the image. I think you already observed it in our laboratory. So, back to the lesson. You can imagine like it works well for things like this handcraft these old methods here. I imagine that um it works well for things like OCR and the other types of activities where there isn't a huge variation in light and angles and class deformation. However, it was it's hard to scale these types of methods to other types of images of other types of data sets as well. So as I said, handcrafting was hard, messy, and in most cases, it often led to poor results. So CNN solved this problem by having the ability to learn the features themselves, which was a godsend for us. And it basically created this revolution in computer vision. So these here are the hidden layers that I spoke about. So the hidden layers are comprised of CNN. So in the next sections, we're going to take a look at ReLU, pooling layers, fully connected or dense layers, and the output. And we're going to take a look at a lot of other things like max pooling, and we're going to take a look at stride and depth and kernel size and all of the submax and all of those things. Okay, so in this section where we take a look at convolution operation, works on color images. Okay, let's go back to our grayscale scenario. Remember, we built the edge detector here. So this is our edge detector kernel. This is our grayscale two-dimensional image, and this is our feature map output. And you can see it's a fairly simple, straightforward calculation. Okay, so a lot of things or a lot of times beginners have trouble understanding when there's a three dimensions here. So as you can see in the slide now, there are three components, and we do have three kernels for each color. So I'll tell you why that's important. For people are often confused with why is the output is a two-dimensional, and the reason the output is still two-dimensional here, the feature map, is because we take the colors here and then we sum them up. So as you can see, this is one, which is not too visible here. So you can see if it's one plus one gives a number three. Think of it like um, a hole that goes through each of these, no, or these color components, and you can just sum through each cell where no, you can sum through each cell here so that each other corresponds to the same location. It just keeps summing up, and that's how you get the output. And that's how you get the output kernel here. Also, that output and also that now the output kernel is still a 3 by 3 two-dimensional image, but not a three-dimensional image. That's what important point is here. So what are the advantages of having color components as your filters? So now, so imagine we're looking for a red stop sign, but however, imagine there's a similar sign that what you in the stop sign. No? Example, there's a green stop sign. The way we detect colors is by having these different color kernels here. So one of these kernels could be corresponding to the red stop sign, and the other could be corresponding, could be means to detect green signs and blue signs and different color combinations. So that's why it's quite important to have each filter, each color component. So this is how it treating volumes work, no? And we're going to take a look at basically how it works when we have multiple filters. So you previously saw examples where we just had one filter. However, in reality, as I said, CNNs tend to have many filters that can have hundreds, even thousands. Although that's a bit excessive. In most cases, it was like I think between 64 and 256 filters for some simple classifiers. So let's take a look at this. This is now with two filters, and you can see, let's say this is for just for example purposes. Let's say this is 5 by 5 by 3 image here. Remember, this is a color component of each image. So we had red, green, and blue RGB. And this here is the pixel. So remember, each pixel point, the 0 by 0 top left here, has three color components associated with it. So that's why it's 5 by 5 by 3 grid of volume right now, because we have three layers here. And here we have we're using two filters now instead of one. Like in the previous samples, so it's a 3 by 3 by 2 because it's two filters now. And and this allows us now to produce two feature maps instead of one. So you can see now the number of feature maps is directly related to the number of kernels here. So this is how you actually calculated the feature map volume here. So you can see n by n by nc, which is the depth. So it's 5 by 5 by 3. So this one here is f by f by nc. So that's a filter. So you have a 3 by 3, and we have a 3 depth again here. And this is what of the output feature size is going to be. It's going to be n minus f plus 1, which is 3. Similarly, 3 here multiplied by nf, which is 2. And what is nf is a number of filters. So that's basically a mathematical way of just showing how these sizes are mapped back to the output of the feature map. This is not that complicated. It's just way to establish some guidelines. So when you're actually calculating what your feature map should be, you have a formula to work with. This is the formula right here, no? So that concludes this section on how you operate convolutions on 3D images or color image. So now let's take a look at kernel size and depth. So these are some parameters that actually control the size of our convolutional filter and controls the size of our feature map as well. So some parameters that control the convolutional filter, as I mentioned, are kernel size and depth. Depth meaning 1 for grayscale and 3 for RGB, which you've seen previously. So there are also a stride and padding, which we'll do in the following slides. So let's take a look at this. So previously, when we using our filters, we only use a 3 by 3 filter. The question is, can there be other sizes? Can it be a 4 by 4, 5 by 5, or 7 by 7? Does it have to be square? What's going on? So actually, well, yes, it has to be square and it has to be odd numbered filters. And well, I will explain to you why. So, firstly, before I go into that explanation, so what I want to show you is if you use a 5 by 5 filter here, no, for this example, and we here we have a 6 by 6. um I know this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this one is a 5 by 5 kernel, and this one is a 6 by 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this is a 6 by 6 image here. So we have for this formula to check the feature map size. So when we have n minus f plus 1 equals m. So right now here, so n is for the dimension of this image. We have 6 by 6. So 6 minus the filter size or the kernel size is 5. Then 6 minus 5 plus 1 is equal to 2. So we have a feature map size 2 here. So, okay. So, okay. So I said, well, we couldn't have an even numbered filters. So why? Why is that, no? Well, if you go back to this slide, no. So as you can see, when you put the 5 matrix here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And here there's a center point. For example, here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one. So there's a center point here in the middle, no? If you put this one here, so well, this one is to um so well, this one is the this little point here is the center point. However, if it was a 4 by 4 matrix here, there will be no center point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you can see, there will be no center point. So well, that will cause a problem because it will somehow, if we go back to the slides, the recent slide, it will cause distortions across the layers. So, basically, it will messes up the symmetry of our filters. That will leads to distortions. And obviously here, once this one, so it will somehow lose the information if we use or if we use an even numbered filter. So while it can work and there's no mathematical reason why we can't have an even number filter, in theory and practice, convolutional networks don't perform well with even numbers or even sized um, filters to work much better with odd size filters because of that symmetry around the center point o- or the anchor point. So it is based on the experience of most designers for CNNs. So that's why they use odd size filters instead of even number for filter dimension. So let's move on to depth. So remember, I referred to depth as being the number of channels in an image, as you can see here for RGB. So that doesn't always refer to that in some nomenclature. So depth can refer to how many kernels or filters you are using, which technically it's wrong because it's actually 4 dimensions instead of 2 dimensions. But nevertheless, some researchers tend to use it oftentimes. Maybe when you're talking about grayscale images, then depth would refer to the 2 dimension. However, it can also refer to the 4 dimensions. Um, Generally, um, depth does refer to the 2 dimensions. It kind of means that there's a kind of always indicates the color of the image, whether a color or a grayscale. So now let's take a look at padding, which allows us to manipulate the feature map size as we progress through the convolution or the convolutional neural network, which you'll see shortly. So remember this lesson. Remember when we have an image of a size by 5 and we perform a convolution with a 3 by 3 filter here. It gives a 3 by 3 output. But I remember there was a formula. We can calculate the output size by and notice the important thing that the output produced is smaller than the input here. Remember, this is a 5 by 5 and this one is 3 by 3. Is that something that we want? Is that is that desirable? Well, um think about think about this. In almost all convolutional neural networks, there are there is a sequence of convolutions like in a chain. And you can imagine this chain was sequence of convolution blocks. They will actually decrease the feature map size as it progresses through the network. And that's not always desirable. In fact, in most cases, that's not desirable. These are the convolutional blocks in this example here, this one and this one. So we can see that consecutive convolution layers keep shrinking the output. But is there a way we can preserve our image size? So what if we took the image, this five by five image, but we padded it with zeros in all dimensions. So you can see all zeros on the top, at the right, at the bottom, and on the left. So this now gives us a 7 by 7 matrix. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, what if we perform the convolution on this? And you can see as we keep going, and move along until we get the output. Then again, okay, for this one. Okay, and again. Okay, so let's stop here. Let's say this is the output from what we perform here, the convolutional operations here. So we are going to produce a feature map size that is now a 5 by 5. Now, what else was 5 by 5? Oh, the input image was 5 by 5. Uh, as you can see it here, the pink region here, and you can see what a formula it works out to be. 7 minus 3 plus 1, which is 5. So this is a way we can use something called padding, which is simply just padding the input with zeros around it to preserve the image size. So why do we use padding? I mean, as I said, it's not always desirable to have the image shrink. But why is that so? Well, for a very deep neural networks, and when we say very deep networks, deep networks store a lot of information. You can imagine like how much filters and parameters and activations all stores. So if you want to keep a very deep network for a very complex data set, you want to basically use padding to preserve the image size or the feature map size as it progresses to the network. And now, um, there's um, there's also a second reason why we use padding. Remember how we pass the convolutional filter across the image. So uh, we let's say we remove it from, or we move it from left to right, Well, think about something with pixels at the edges. So they only get touch once or minimal less amount of times than the pixels in the middle. So that means they contributed, example this one and this. So that means they contributed less to the output of the feature map. And that means we're throwing away information from them. And that's not desirable. However, if we're using padding, because as you can imagine, this image being padded with zeros, all of the sliding window now touches these edges here or these edge pixels a lot more often. So it helps the neural network learn a more balanced information as well. So for now, so that concludes this section on padding, and let's talk about stride. So stride as a parameter that allows us to define how we move our convolutional filter. So stride is basically our step size. Stride defines how many steps we take when we're sliding our convolution window across the image. So let's take a look at that. So remember, just the convolutions we did previously, that was stride of 1, as you can see here. And let's take a look at what it looks like. So you see, it moves 1 pixel to the right. Then once again, okay, and 1 down, 1 right, 1 right again, 1 down again, 1 right, and 1 right. It's just 1 pixel at a time. Now, what what about stride of 2? So let's take a look and what that see what that looks like. As you can see, it's skipped now 2 points. So instead of this blue something here, the blue starts here, just like that for this case. And similarly, when you're going down, it goes down 2 points. So as you can see, or well, so now, um, there are only 4 points or 4 available movements when you're using a stride of 2. So what does that mean? So well, if you were paying attention, you may have noticed that the feature map or the output size has gotten smaller. It's now 2 by 2. When previously, let's take a look, example here, it's 3 by 3. Using um, the step size of 1. So let's go back here. Okay. So what it means now is that by making larger strides, we're actually reducing the size of the feature map or the output feature map. So there's some observations to note with stride. A larger stride produce produces a smaller feature map. Like we just said, larger stride has less overlap too. Lesser overlap, meaning that because of the jumps, so it's not using the same pixel information twice, so it has less overlap in that sense. So we do use stride to control the feature map output. And why is that important? Well, you may not know. You may not know this yet because you're just starting your journey on convolutional neural nets. But big networks work very well. However, they are quite slow to train. Training them leads to a lot of problems as well because it's get too complex and you have issues with convergence. So it's always good to try to get the best size, the optimized size, and optimized performance. It's one network that's too big. It's basically. So we can now we can calculate the filter size. So the feature map size with this formula. So now uses stride and padding in this formula. So n by n is the input size 5 by 5. Then p is for padding. So in this case, we have 0 and minus f is the feature or no, no, the filter or kernel size here, which is 3, then divided by the stride, which is 2. So as you can see, so we have the value of, or we have the feature map value now is 2 by 2. So, okay, so with let's try to change this one to stride of 1. So as you would expect, going back to the slide, if we want to go back to the slide of a slide of 2, gives us a small feature map. It is a 2 by 2 grid. So, so right now, if we have a stride of 1, it gives us a 3 by 3. And if you can plug into the values in this formula, so we get a 3 by 3. But what about if we were to use a padding of 1? So now let's plug into padding values into formula and see how it goes. So you remember previously it was 1 for stride and padding by 0. Now it's 1 for stride and 1 for padding. So we substitute these values, which gives us that 5 by 5 size here. So you can see if we increase stride and we get smaller feature size or feature maps. If we increase padding, we can get larger feature maps. So it's an balancing act. Normally, I'll tell you, if most neural networks, we know CNNs, I should say we use the stride of 1 and padding of 1. We don't deviate too much for those sizes as well, as filter tends to be a 3 by 3. 5, it depends, no? It tends to be 3 by 3, 5 by 5, 7 by 7, 9 by 9. There was a standard Size filters, typically we don't go too much bigger than those. So for now, that's it for this lesson, and we're about to start the lesson on activation layers, and we'll talk a bit about ReLU. So which is the most important useful function or activation layer for CNNs. So let's take a look and see why activation is important. So um, so it's important. Um, so it's important you think about the purpose of an activation function. So this could confuse a lot of you. So I will be slow and I will try to introduce this topic gently. Firstly, remember we're trying to learn complex patterns in our data. So these complex patterns means that the data is so vast and has so much different variations that small changes like imagine you're trying to identify digits and the difference between a 1 and a 7. Well, it doesn't mean much, no? For example, here, example, we have 1 and 7. Well, they are somehow there's a small difference between these two numbers. So well, let me erase this one. Okay. So it's just that this one has a bit more well straight and vertical, as a 7 has a slight angle and it has a top horizontal bar went up, and we can say it is 7. But those are minor differences. So if you think about it has it if you think about it and we do different, the way our mind actually knows that it's 7 and a 1, it's just same as it there's a decision boundary in our brains. And our brains basically are just a bunch of neurons that effectively what it is that fire and activate and be able to identify what's quite efficiently and quite quickly. It's actually amazing how efficient our brains are for this. So so in this case, so this gets to the point where we talk about we say it is the non-linearity. And well, remember I talked about the decision boundary between a 1 and a 7. And now imagine we have a whole host of digits. So you all have numbers and you all have all the numbers and the alphabets and all the digits from 1 to or 0 to 10. That's a lot of different classes. So we need to have a complicated way. Basically, it's a nonlinear type function that can take these inputs and produce the output that we want. So when that's the output, that's correct, I should say. So that's for the non-linearity. It's basically decision boundaries that vary and depend on many different factors. It's not a linear type mapping function. So that's hopefully that gives you some intuition on why activation functions are important and what they allow to scenes to learn. So let's take a look at some simple activation functions. So we're going to talk a bit about ReLU in depth. So ReLU is the advantageous in CNN training because it's actually quite simple. It's quite simple computation and it's faster to train, which means in fact it's fast to train and it doesn't saturate. So that's also a good point. So let's take a look at some simple activation functions. And you're seeing this function here, and this function here, and this function here, which is ReLU, the rectified linear unit. This what it stands for. So what does this mean? Let's take a look at the ReLU in this case. So this means that all of the inputs into this function that are less than 0, example here, is always be 0. So that's what this mathematical function is saying here. If z is less than 0, it's 0. However, if z is greater than 0, then it takes the value of the z. So that's the nonlinearity part of this function right here. So as you can see, this is the another way to represent ReLU. Basically, it's a max of everything that's over 0. And the max meaning that it just gets the value of x here and everything below 0 is 0 basically. So we leave all positive values alone and we change all negative values to 0. That's ReLU in a nutshell. So let's take a look and see how we apply a ReLU mathematically. So let's see what it does to our output feature map. So this is the output feature map we get by convolving this input image with this filter or kernel. And you can see uh, we have 2, 1, -1, we have -1, 1, 3, and 2, 1, -5. Remember what really we said, we change all the negative values to 0 and leave all the positive values alone. Well, that's simply what we do. So all the negative values here becomes 0. So you can see them here as all the positive values remain the same. That's quite, that's quite simple. That's what ReLU does. So ReLU is often considered to be the same layer as a convolutional layer. We just specify what activation function we're using. However, in a lot of the literature, you will um, you will read some authors or researchers like to call ReLU a separate layer when in fact some people lump it together. So I'm of the opinion that that can be both. However, we want to infer Just make sure you're consistent when seeing it, as this neural net has 9 layers and you want to compare it to another one. Just make sure you compare them correctly. So this is an example of how the ReLU operation works after we take um, this feature map and we apply ReLU to it. So as you can see, the output here, you can see what's happening is that all of the dark values, which are the negative values, are being basically eliminated in a way, and all the white values are roughly, in this case, staying. So that's it for the value lesson. No? For this one, as you can see, all the negative values here are black. Then if you apply the value activation, so right now they are eliminated, they are converted all to zero values as the formula says, and we leave all those white or greater to zero as it is. So now let's start looking at padding. I know this is pooling. So we were explore the max pool layer and its purpose in CNN. So let's get started. So firstly, pooling is simply the process where we reduce the size or the dimensionality of a feature map as we progress to the network. Now you may have you will recall seeing that reducing the size isn't always good because we tend to lose information. However, pooling with the max pool operation that we use in CNNs allows us to actually keep the most of the information so we don't lose too much. And this is important because now it allows us to reduce the number of parameters in one network, which mean that it's much faster in training. Um, and it can be inference. It can be inference faster as well. So it's a good thing that pooling is around, and this process is also called some sampling and downsampling. So in the literature, if you might come across something where it says we subsample the feature map or downsample. Basically, pooling is what they're doing. Pooling is the standard name, but mostly everyone uses it. But sometimes you will come across these terms. So here's an example of a max pooling. Imagine this is the feature map output right here. We use two parameters to control a max pool operation. We use the kernel size and stride. So 2 by 2 kernel means that the first instance of a sliding window covers this, this yellow portion here. The second instance covers the blue portion here. And the third of well, the third is the red, and the other one, the green, is the fourth. So now you may have already figured out by looking at this one. But the Maxwell operation is simply takes the largest number in this block. So in this 2 by 2 grid, no, in this case, so that's example here. We have 123. The other one here is 253. Here is 187. And the other one is 165. So you can see effectively that's how max pooling works. So it's quite simple. So it was um, well this was a 4 by 4 feature map, and by applying the max pool with a 2 by 2 kernel and a two for stride, so we get 2 by 2 matrix, and that's the output for this one. No? So it's half the size of the um well in this feature map. So it means so that means it reduce the with so that it reduce it by the scale factor of 2. And as you can see, if we go back, okay, as you can see, if we there is we call it average. We have this one. No? We have average pooling and sum pooling here. So as you can see, we can operate average pooling operation instead of max pooling. So we need to take the average of this. Then we need to put this in here, the average in here, next and next. Same as the other one, the sum pooling, obviously. So you need to add each of these blocks here to, and then this is the sum, for example. Okay, and well, no, there's a bit more on pooling. So I already explained the average pool and summing pool. So typically we used to use two kernels with a stride of two with um with no padding in this case. So with um those parameters tends to give us fairly good results, and it also has to reduce the dimensionality by a factor of 2 with the height and the width of factor of 2 for width and height. And now pooling also has the advantage where it makes our model more invariant to minor transformations and distortions in our image. Okay. Lastly, if we go back, average pooling, imagine by from the name. So as I already explained, average, we need to average this one. So what will be the result for the average of these four blocks here will be added here. So instead of max pool, it will be average pooling. If you're using sum, so you need to sum all of this, then the sum here is you need to add, and the sum resulted sum here will be this one. So that will be a summing pool operation. And okay, and so how does max pooling achieve translation and invariance? Let's take a look at this this slide. As you can see, We can convolve it with this kernel here with this filter, and we get the feature map output where with this blue portion here being re- being represented here. And then after applying a max pull, we get this blue thing here being here the largest portion here. So this is just a hypothetical output. By the way, because we don't have values in this here, but just imagine that this was the output of the feature map and this was the output of the max pull operation. Now, what if we shift our C downward? So we can now see that the feature map has a different output now. So this makes it turn on as opposed to this one. So by applying the max pull though, because it's still in this 2 by 2 grid here, so the max pull output is still the same. So this is how we achieve some translation and variance using the max pull. So why does max pull works? Well, as we saw, the purpose of using max pooling is to reduce the feature map size by half in most cases. And when I say half, that's when we're using the 2 by 2 and a stride of 2. So is that okay? Well, I showed you before that it allows us to have translation and variance without losing information, which is a good thing. So why is that? Well, that's because neighboring pixels are usually strongly correlated in the lowest layers, especially the especially that strong correlation allows us to use a max pull operation to reduce feature size without losing much information. Remember, in the further part, two pixels are less correlated. They are and exclusively are more correlated. So they are as well as they tend to have a lot of similar associations because that's just how images are are one pixel and immediate pixels near might be the same color. So which is a good thing, which means a Maxwell operation doesn't inherently lose much information. And when applying it to the image. So that's what this line says here. No? As we can apply reduce the size of the output by subsampling or by subsampling a pooling, and we don't actually lose much information. However, though just remember by using a bigger stride in the pooling layer, it will lead to some information loss. So you can't do this without having a cost at the end. So in practice, researchers have found that the stride of 2 and the kernel size of 2 for the pooling layer was found to be effective in practice. So it usually works quite well without losing information and allows the CNN to still learn a lot of information. Okay, we're on the section of on fully connected layer. So we will explore what it is and what the purpose of fully connected layer in the CNN. So, okay. Firstly, what is fully connected mean? Well, simply means all the nodes in one layer are connected to the outputs of the next layer. So I will describe that to you in the diagram shortly. However, just so you know, it takes 3D volume output of the previous layer and flattens it into a single vector, and that is used for inputs in the next layer. It's also sometimes called a dense layer, so this text is quite confusing. So let's take a look at the diagram and get better understanding of what fully connected layer does. So as you can see, these are feature maps here. Remember, we got features. So we get feature maps from after applying the convolution filter to the image, and when we can apply some max pool to it and relu as well. So these are the outputs here. So what fully connected layer or the FC layer does, it simply flattens all of these filters of all of these outputs into a single vector like this, no? So 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 you can see it's a row here and it's a row here and a column. And then the next filter is added. And then the last filter is added again to the bottom. So so you have this one dimensional vector with all the values from the feature maps from these feature maps, and every node here is connected to the final output nodes. So these output nodes will deal with the next section, but these output nodes are very important. And basically, we have all of those nodes were connected to each output. So that's that's why there's so many lines here, because this is a fully connected. So what's the purpose of this fully connected layer? Well, it complies, not complies, it compiles the data outputs extracted from the feature maps and the previous layers to form a final output. But that doesn't tell you much. So effectively, imagine it's an easy way of putting neural net to learn the nonlinear combination of these features. Because remember, we have all these features. This one could be sample here could be whiskers, this could be tail, and this could be the eye. And we have all of these values as indicated as we need to know. Find a way for a neural network to combine different groups or different activations to correlate it to which output is which. That's that's what output nodes are for in the end. So don't worry, this will all fit together nicely in the end. So we're now to the section of the softmax layer. So the softmax layer actually is what produces the final output, the probabilities that come out of our CNN. So let's take a look at this layer. So remember, it was fully connected. So we had our feature maps here from Maxpool layer coming out from that operation. Then we flattened it, and then we connected all of these output nodes. and this one is fully connected. But these output nodes don't output probabilities yet. So there's another layer. It's kind of considered layer, but it's not technically layer. Mathematical operations of these outputs, and that output is a softmax layer. And the reason we do it is because we need to produce probability outcomes of each class in the network. So the softmax converts the logs into probabilities. And then I say logs, I mean the actual outputs we take exponents, we take out the outputs, which you'll see shortly. So it's all I said. It takes the exponents of each output and normalizes each output by the sum of the exponents. And that guarantees that it will all sum to 1 and no values actually 0. So this is the mathematical operational formula for this softmax. So let's take a look at see how it works. So imagine that we have these scores coming from the output layers. So we can apply the softmax function here, which would be 2 squared and divided by the sum of the 2 squared, the 1 squared, and the sum of the point 1 squared. And in the end, and that will give us the probabilities corresponding to each class. So imagine if this node were corresponded to the number in nodes that are the final output of the CNN, and imagine in CNNs or even in neural networks or networks, the outputs are corresponding to a class in a classification problem. So if we have a classification problem where we're trying to identify 10 digits like the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so you will have 10 outputs. Similarly, if you're trying to identify cats, dogs, and penguins, so you might have three outputs or three output nodes. And we take, and basically the output nodes are some scores that indicates like a higher trend or a higher prevalence of it. Being a high indication of it, being that specific class. But we want that in probability of but we want that in probability form because probabilities are easy to work mathematically, and that's where a softmax operation gives us. So in the end, we convert these output values to point 7, point 2, and point 1 in this case. So we will stop here and we will start putting together everything to show how we build a CNN. Okay, so in this section where we finally put all the pieces together and build a CNN, so you should have seen previously all the building blocks that we use. Remember that the convolutional layers, you will remember the convolutional layers, the max pool, the ReLU, or the activation functions, or fully connected layer, and the softmax layers. We're not going to we're going to stack everything together and create a simple CNN. And this is what it looks like. Now, I won't go into I won't go into much detail with this diagram because this diagram can confuse you a bit, but it's an actual real CNN here. So what it tells us, this is the input image, which is a 28 by 28. Gray, obviously, this is a grayscale because it has a one depth here. And you can see, as you can see, this a tiny kernel size here. This is our filter kernel here, and it's applied to this image. There we're using 32 filters in this example here. And we have 32 of these feature maps output. Um, well, here, and the feature map output is 26 by 26. And then we have another convolutional layer here. So we apply the filters again to this layer and we get 24 by 24. And this time we're using 64 filters to produce 64 feature maps. And then we applied a max pool layer here, and then we flatten it, and that max pool connected to an interim fully connected layer. So we have this by 9216 layer connected to a 1 by 128 in this case. 1 by 128 fully connected here. And then that connects to the final 10 output nodes. And then out of a lot of that node, where we have layer, softmax layer here. So let's take a look at this. Now this is a 4-layer CNN. So a lot of times people may be confused counting ReLU as a layer or counting to flatten operation as a layer or counting max pool as a layer. Technically, those layers, yes, but in some or but in our new modern terminology, those aren't really considered layers. They're considered parts of the convolutional layers. So convolutional layers is associated with our activation functions. So it comes as one. So everything in this box here is a layer. So we have one, two, three, four. So we have 4 layers in this CNN. So it's a 4-layer deep CNN that's used to classify handwritten digits. So here's another representation, and this is a representation I prefer because it helps you visually understand what's happening in the CNN. So so you can see this is the input image right here. So these are the filters. The filter is a 3 by 3 in here, and we apply 32 filters. So we get 26 by 26 by 32 feature map output. And uh, then the second convolution or the second convolutional layer has a 3 by 3. Um, well, it has 3 by 3 in this case. And what happened here is, um, and again, it will have um, we have 24 by 24 in this case, and we have a depth of 64. And if we and then if you as you can see, it has a 2 by 2 filter here. So that's the max pool filter size. So that's how we get 12 by 12 by 64. So it's half that, like this one, because it's 24, now it's 12. Remember, this feature map size of 24 by 24 by 64, and by applying max pool, we get an output size of 12 by 12 by 64. And then we flatten this max pool layer. Then we have this interim um, fully connected at 128 new layers here. Then that's connected to the final 10 outputs. So you can see in this table here, this is the depth, the width, the height, and the filter size of each layer. So in case you want to go through it in detail and understand, so feel free to pause this slide and inspect each one of each one to make sure it makes sense to you. So let's take a look at how we calculate the output size of the first convolutional layer. So that's the one in pink. So you can see we had a 28 by 28 by 30 a 3 by 3 filter. So now we can use this formula here in this case. So this one that gives us the feature map output size. So we know we use 32 filters. So we use a stride of 1, padding is 0, and max full stride is 2. So that's for literally as we considered max full. For now, we just use this. So n is 28, and as you can see it here, p, which is padding, is 0, and so it's well, it is 2 by 0, which is 0 minus 3. So 3 is the filter size. So how we get 26 in the end? It's 28 minus 3. So which is 25 over 1. So plus 25 plus 1, which is 26. So that's how we get to 26 by 26. In the olden days of constructing CNNs and neural networks, we would have to hand calculate these things. Nowadays, libraries which does help us quite a bit, but it's important to understand the size of the layer as they go through. This is something you may need to do a lot of times, or sometimes you own sometimes building your own CNN. So let's take a look to the second convolutional layer, conv2. So there again, just like this. So the feature map size now has 26 by 26. So okay, so we use the 26 here. The padding is again 0 in this case, and the filter size is 3. So, so you can see in the formula over here, we have 26 plus, which is 0, of 1 minus 3, and it gives us 23 plus 1, which is 24. So that's how you get 24 by 24 at the output size. And remember, we did 2 dimensions, which is the depth of these filters. Depend on how much filters are being used, which we simply when which we specify when designing our CNNs. So we do hard coded how many filters we want to use, and then the CNN libraries take it from there and start training. and we'll go into training extensively in the next sections. But for now, it's important for you to understand all the building blocks of CNNs. That's forward propagation part of the CNN. So let's take a look to the output size of calculation for max pool. So this one is simple. One, and that formula still holds up as well. We have in which is 24 to P, which is P is 0 again, minus F, which is 2 divided by 2. So we have 24 minus, which is 22, which is 11 plus 1 is 12. And now that's how we get 12 by 12. So now let's take a look at how we calculated up the size of the flattened layer. So you can see the flattened layer is right here. It's 9,216. That's actually quite simple. You just multiply all the dimensions of the max layer here. So 12 by 64, which is effectively flattening the layer. So that's how we got that there. It's quite simple to work out. So, okay, for the rest of the CNN, this is another hard-coded 128 nodes here. This is something we can specify and you can use any number. I tend to use powers of 2 for my sizes, but you can use everything you want. You can use 100,000. I've seen a lot of people use 1,000 decimal base numbers, so it's fine. And the output, the class here. So the output nodes represents the each one represents a class. So remember, it's in hundred in digits. We have 10 by uh, 10 digits 0 to 9. So we have a node that represents a probability of the output of it, of the image being that class. So that is for building the building blocks of the CNN. I know it probably still isn't fit to get it fully for you yet, but I will get shortly. And don't worry, it it all makes sense. So for now, we just tackle the 2.1 to 2.11 for this lesson. Thank you for listening.